All right, we back at it again. Man, I hope I get a lot of, good feed on this. Think- I know it's gonna be a lot of little static and drop places, but y'all work with me through the process. I'm actually, moving. I'm always making money. I'm always doing something. Shout out to everybody that's gonna come through here and check out this, man. We see a lot of surviving people videos, and I hope this might get survived, because I'm be going through some drop zones. I know this should be one right here, and then it's gonna ease smooth back out. Hey, this is the life of a truck driver, man. I'm out here working. I'm always busy on the clock, man. You know, that's why I don't do too many pods because I'm out here on the grind, man. I'm trying to get it. Hey, I'm trying to get it. But we getting into it right now. So surviving. You got two forms of survival that I put in there: surviving yourself and surviving your finance. Pretty much when it comes down to it, surviving. Let's get into surviving yourself first, and that's the way you can adapt into surviving your finance. So going into it, and then you see the thumbnail about the rebirth, and that's when you get the awakening and you break through the process on doing these things. So, pretty much surviving yourself. And it kind of opened up a lot of different avenues that I was researching, more or less dealing with trauma. And man, trauma is some heavy stuff, man. So, prime example, I was looking at a guy, he was saying that he had a car accident. And this guy is one of the specialists in trauma. So he knows how to deal, knows how to cope with certain things. What's going on, Tamika? But when it came down to it, the trauma that he got, from having a car accident, it was like serious to him. This is a guy who deals with trauma, who does research on it and everything. So that shows that nobody's immune to anything, just because this guy, research, analyze, and all this stuff, you still go through it. So when it come down to it, this guy basically, was in his car in the wintertime, up in Colorado, and going around a curve. He went around several curves, but the last curve, it's like his tires locked up, and he just went straight and ran into another car, airbag deployed, everything. And he kind of got a little shook up about it, and he started noticing for 2 weeks he wasn't himself when he would go drive, and just possibly thinking about the incident. So he ended up going to a facility. They checked his brain, showed that he had a lot of activity on one side of his brain, and he was unbalanced and it dealt with the trauma, and it was a lot of stuff he broke down about that, you know and going through that trauma basically broke him down and made him into a whole different person, and he literally had to snap out of it. Let me give y'all a brief pause because I'm going through a dead zone over here. So just give y'all a brief pause for a minute. Play some elevated music. Hopefully y'all can hear it or not. But doo 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 doo. Just playing. But yeah, going through a little area right here. So I know it normally breaks up over here. Like I said, I'm out and about driving, podding, and check out that last video I just dropped with Suge Knight doing a podcast, collect call from jail. Crazy, ain't it? Shout out to the supporters, shout out to people that come in. I'm a YouTuber now, so I gotta tell y'all, hit the like button. If you share, you share. But if it's for people, it's for people. If it's not, it's just not. Everybody's not gonna get the message. Everybody's not gonna be welcome to the information. To each his own. Okay. All right, I'm gonna get back into it. It should be smoothing out now. Hopefully y'all heard me through that process. But when it comes down to it, nevertheless, this guy had his issue. And you talked about all dealing with trauma, dealing with things that you can overcome, and making you be a better person. April Showers in the building. What's going on with you, April Showers? And it created a whole trauma. I think I'm probably gonna stop calling names in a minute because I know I have a lot of stuff I'm gonna break down, and it's just rattling in my head right now. So I want to complete the process. And that's what I normally used to do over time. But people were saying that they like to be acknowledged when they come in the chat from other channels. So I thought that would be more of a thing to just start calling out because I come on and I pod and that's it. Give the information and jump off. But a lot of people want to be acknowledged, and I understand that. So I'm gonna start calling out names, and then it gets to a point, then I'm gonna have to just keep rolling. But more or less, the guy went through this trauma of having an accident. So when he had the accident, it traumatized him to every time he drive, he would have this eerie feeling, and he didn't know where it was coming from and stuff like that. So we're dealing with the surviving yourself first and going through things, the trauma, you got to go through those trauma related issues. You know, that's why even, partly going into finance, that's why I have a lot of people have bad dealings with finance because for one, they don't know nothing. So for someone to just spring something on them real quick, it traumatizes them, prime example, you have some of the celebrities, the first thing they always say, do not play with the IRS, give them their money. They do not play. They're traumatized by the IRS to the point where they give more sometimes because they don't want no problems. Just hey, everybody makes mistakes. Everybody goes through, but you go to a point of being traumatized dealing with your finance. You know, and as a person not knowing things, trauma comes rapidly. You be in a situation, incidents get pulled over. If you know your rights, you stand your ground and everything's cool. But if a person doesn't know their rights, and needless to say, we all know in America, as far as the black population and what we go through, in general from the police. So when it comes down to it, a lot of us are traumatized by that, those situations, and it takes certain levels of understanding with most to deal with it, and some of them they just can't handle it. They spaz out, and the trauma of seeing people get killed several times online, you know, has this, kind of feel or eeriness towards police officers. And, some people understand, but some people, hey, they normally, don't even understand because, hey, if you never been through a process, you never, really know or go through it. Yeah, the PTSD, and shout out to you, make this go viral, you know. LLC, I got to add that on that LLC. What's going on, Miss V? And when it comes down to it, it's a major issue. So more or less, surviving yourself, you need help. The best thing to do, seek counsel, and if not, more or less, you can't really talk. The best effort is just talking to someone. That makes a big difference when you talk to someone. You kind of relieve pressure. That's like holding a wound that's, just full of, blood or pus or whatever, just like you have a pimple. That pimple finally pops, the pressure relieves. Same thing for a pipe. Pressure bust pipes, they always say. So when the pressure relieves off that pipe, it's good for the pipe, but it's bad for the person that has to deal with, everything that comes behind that pressure. So it's a crazy, kind of thing sort of that people deal with. And more or less knowing things, knowing yourself, it helps. The process of I know I can't take, stress. So you try to be in a less stress environment. You try not to worry or do things that stress you out because stress is the silent killer. Most people technically don't know that, but stress is the silent killer. When it comes to stress, stress will literally have you having heart attacks, strokes, and everything. I've known people as young as 16 I think younger than that, having strokes due to the point of the environment. You know, so that's one thing you gotta deal with is yourself, your stress level. You know, key things. Try to be in situations that make you happy. When you're an adult, majority of times you can control most situations, but as a child, you're in an environment dealing with your parents. Shout out to boss lady Denise. When it comes down to it, a lot of times, us as parents, we have to see or try to give our kids the better picture, you know, because I was just listening to a podcast, Talk Heavy. They say some wild stuff on their Talk Heavy podcast, but a lot of stuff it hits because these are real conversations. They get into a lot of deep, crazy stuff, but it's real conversations people ought to be having. But more or less, just having those situations that you're dealing with family, and it's a lot of stress when you have to deal with the process of someone you don't like in your family, someone you're dealing with constantly in a relationship, and a lot of people don't know how to leave because nobody's ever taught them. you know there are situations where I heard people just going through things to be going through them, because at the end of the day, they don't know how to cope with rejection. They don't know how to cope with just actually leaving. A lot of people get to the point where they're thinking they're therapists or they think they're healers. You have situations where men and women feel sorry in their relationships with people just because they're feeling sorry for them going through stress and going through pain and going through adversity. And, from a standpoint, they think they can help. A lot of the relationships get deaded like that. Prime example, Jerry Maguire. That was one of the movies where he married her because he felt sorry for her kid. Felt sorry for her. He put her in a situation to quit her job. And, he felt compelled to actually do everything to make her somewhat. But in the end, when they were looking at the wedding photos or the videos and stuff, found out he probably really didn't like her. He did it on a whim of, something else. And then ultimately came back in the movie. That's when the whole thing of the pursuit of happiness he found within her, and ultimately start loving her, wanting to be with her. And it takes time. Some people, I was listening to the guy who was talking about the trauma. It takes time for people to get over trauma. You know, you on the outside looking in can't help people because that's a self thing. They got to come to the realization. You can motivate them, you can put them in the right, feelings, should say, and situations to hopefully they can, move and come out of that. But other than that, mainly they got to go through it. It's a situation in the process in which they have to go through and regard, your feelings. You have to be elevated and feel warm. You have a environment in which you're loving and appreciated, and it comes down to the point. Just in general, people will say, "Well, I had a rough life growing up. I want my kids to have the best." And sometimes you overindulge and you spoil them too much. There's a boundary and there's a balance in everything. A lot of people, kind of to a degree, doesn't, you know how to have that balance and that boundary because they never had it in their family or their relationships. You know, when it comes down to it, if there's an issue going on with me and in my family, I don't know how to, deal with the process because for one, I've never really, really, truly learned. I'm just taking note. Prime example, I say this every so often when it comes down to it. There are a lot of people that cope with things and deal with things due to the fact that they're just learning on the fly. Prime example with men and women in their relationships. There's no real actual, self-taught on how to deal because my relationship is different from the next. I tell guys what worked for me and my wife might not work for you and your wife. The type of relationship I have with my wife might not be the type of relationship you have with your wife. So you have to deal with the circumstances. And a lot of people, they they're not taught anything, so everything is new to them. So surviving within yourself, gaining the knowledge. I always talk about this. I always talk about this. Gaining the knowledge within a relationship, gaining the knowledge within your finances. Learn how to do stocks. Learn how to, buy a house. That's why I think I got to start back getting into it because, this is a process in which a lot of people need to understand. Your kids might be in a position. What's going on, Ray? You're going to be in a position to where your kids and grandkids might not be able to afford a house. You have several companies and, pretty much investors that are buying up all the houses, buying up all the houses. It's one company alone last year easily bought 60,000 houses and they're up for rent. So they technically control the rent market. So for people that say, well, I don't want to buy, I want to keep renting, you're actually going to get, pushed out. There's situations to where I seen a guy up in Connecticut was saying that he worked 40-hour work weeks and he still can't afford a house. And he has a government job to the point where he can't afford living in the city that he works in. And he has to move out of that area where it's still expensive. And with him not being married, having to look for a roommate or possibly getting married to make it work. And he said it doesn't make any sense for him to, be older man, because he's not young. He's probably in his 40s or 50s. I was looking at the video. And to a degree, this guy can't even afford it, you know. Not like he made bad decisions. He works a 40-hour work week, great job with the city, but can't afford a home. And renting is out of the question. Renting is out of the question. Most people don't realize you actually save more money buying a home, but then you have to put money aside. There's, warranties. There's extended warranties on items on your house that where if your, water heater busts, you get a new water heater. If your roof mess up, you get all these things of which people don't know because for one, it goes back to the knowledge where people are not doing the research. But getting back to yourself, motivation for yourself, a lot of people don't take the time and go into therapy to a degree. You know, we're from the age of, oh man, I'll tough it out. We're from the age of, man, it's not that bad, you know. And sometimes we go through issues alone because we can't talk to family. Sometimes family reject us, or in general, sometimes family members don't understand. You ever tried to talk to someone about, marriage and they've never been married before? They're giving you the advice from a single point of view. The relationship is different when you're single because, hey, if you cheat, you cheat. You know, if you're in a relationship and, hey, issues come about, we not really technically married. You can throw that. But when you're married, you're going to have to hold things to a standard, you know. And some people by far, hey, they just don't get it. You know, you can't just, every time you have an argument, kick someone out. That shouldn't be the case. But in most marriages, they treat it just like a boyfriend and girlfriend relationship. You get mad, you kick the person out, whether it be the man, whether it be the woman, y'all have y'all issues. When it comes down to it, you have your points of reference to where you should be able to go in the house, whatever happens, you have to sit down and work it out, you know. And even to a point, I was talking to a coworker. A lot of people never self-reflect on a lot of situations, And taking from the book of Kevin, he talks about this. A lot of times, if it doesn't really involve cheating or physical abuse, what are the main reasons people are getting divorced from? Psychologically, you run out of a relationship and Just not even blaming on the women. Men do the same thing. I once heard a guy, he say he wasn't ready for marriage. He got married too soon, but he had two kids by the woman. You know, After two kids, you feel like you're not ready for marriage. And it's like kind of crazy. Same thing for a woman. They have this whole, push to women living their best life. Like mentally, how is that affecting your life? You know, your best life is what you make of it. It's not what people tell you. It's technically speaking what you make of it. And what's going on, NC worker? And we have issues to where we follow everyone else. And I've always said this throughout having conversations with people. My role models are people who I can talk to, who I can call, I can shake their hand, because to a point of them knowing me and to a point of them, you know, I know their situations, I know what they go through. The best advice is going to come from people that have your best interest at heart. And a lot of people just generally don't understand that, you know. So we have issue and have fault with people, but we have to look within ourselves. You know, I can hear a celebrity talk about things and issues, and it's all good and standards. But when it comes down to it, that celebrity doesn't have my life. That celebrity, has millions of dollars. That celebrity can get paid to push a narrative. If you don't believe me, go to your local, Best Buy or online and listen to a rap song. You hear all these rappers, talking about gang life, and it's to an issue. Some of those guys do, approach that lifestyle, but some of those guys is just an image. Some of those guys never really been in the street, probably never smoked or drink, but to a point they can advertise, the bottles, the weed, the pills. I heard this one rapper talking about, I never took the pill a day in my life. I smoke weed, but I never took the pill a day in my life. But the streets talk about these oxycontins. The streets talks about these mollies. What's going on, E? How you doing now? E is God, son. What's going on with you? And and it gets to a point where a lot of people, follow the trends. If everybody else is doing it, why not? Nobody's telling the detriment. Prime example, listening to Beyonce song, and she's empowering women. Nothing wrong with that. But when she's talking about all the single ladies and she's married and she's saying, the Lemonade songs and all this crazy whatever going through, I don't really listen to her lyrics like that, so I can't really, break it all down. But to a point, she's married. And Sierra, the same concept. She just had a song where everybody bashed her about, to all the single ladies, this is the way to move. And women were coming out saying that, I want to hear you about your marriage. I want to hear what marriage life really is. And that's what I want. See, that is the mind manipulation to which most people go through this process, and they have to survive within themselves, because all the stuff that they were taught to a degree, was a lie, or pushed to, was a narrative to get them to go right and everybody else go left, or vice versa. You know, I'm a family man. Yes, I've always never been married, but to a degree, to the point of me being married, I'm not gonna go against a lot of the women that, that it's their upbringing. And when it comes down to it, I hear a lot of fault and a lot of pushback on the women. My thing is, I don't have to deal with those women, married or not. I only deal with women of my choice. And, sometimes we have to have that conversation. Even in going into a relationship with the women, they should be only dealing with men of their choice. And you get what you get. Whatever you put out in the world, that's what you get. You know, and it's hard to say that to most, because there are some good women that get into bad relationships. Check your circle. You know, I always use this comment, Will Smith. You know, he's the least of five people that does better than him. You know, this big actor, movie star, TV star, singer, rapper, artist, whatever, and he's the least of his five friends. You know, and that puts a point to where you have to look at that. They have other people that have this standard of your five friends. Show me five of your friends, and I can show you where your life is going. And a lot of people don't really look at that point to be true because when it comes down to it, hey, what are you really doing for yourself? But real quick, I'm gonna get into the finance aspect. Surviving within finance, and I've talked about this several times, and just getting the knowledge. A lot of people do not get the knowledge. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with joking. There's nothing wrong with feeling good and hanging out and kicking it with people. But it comes to a point to where you literally for yourself as an adult should be seeking the knowledge to do better for yourself. Even if you're doing it to, enlighten your kids, but mainly for you for the most part. Being a better you, going through things and not having to go through them. I was just listening to a podcast where the woman say she couldn't deal with a man because he didn't know how to fill out a bank slip for deposit. And this guy was in his 40s, 30s, I think, 30s. And, something simple as that, nobody's taught you, but to a degree, asking questions. So that goes to a point of how many times you just ran through cash. How many times, you had sums of money you never put in the bank. You just walk around with loads of cash on. You know, that poses a lot of questions, a lot of issues to some people to where you don't even know how to balance the checkbook or know how to balance your account to where you won't get an overdraft. Seeking that small knowledge is a big key. Even with going into issues of having overdraft, which people have several times over and over because of the process of you not knowing yourself. You're not, taking the process on learning this stuff, from kids. I said this several times over. When I was a young boy, not even young boy, I'm sorry, when I was a teenager in high school, stayed with my grandmother. She had a situation to where she had to go to the hospital. She was in there close to a month, almost month and a half, whatever. And I knew things were going to get cut off. She had her purse there. I went in her purse, grabbed a card, went to my laptop, which I bought, and paid the bills from her card with and everything. And she was looking at it like, how did you know how to do that? Who taught you that? Well, I went and looked it up myself. I seen that the bills had the numbers on there, but I also seen that the bills had the account on there with the account number, and I seen that you can do it online. And which I know my grandma know her age, all this stuff that I might need it to use. But only thing I needed was her address, her account number, which was on the bill, make a password, make a user's name, and there you go. And to that degree, I end up getting to a point to where I can sign in. One more. Sorry about that. Back to the scheduled program, but when it come down to, I'm about to get ready to jump off here anyway. Start to get ready to crank and do some work. But far as your finances, man, it's kind of crazy. A lot of times we don't have the knowledge because our parents didn't have it, and they skimped out on learning to give us, the process of doing better. You know, and other cultures and other, to a degree, if I don't know something, I'll send my kid around somebody that do, or I put him in a room, or I'll try to learn it. I try to teach my kids as much as I know and much as I can find out for them to make a decision what they want to do with their life and just in general any situation. When it comes down to it, my kids are pretty young, so I can mold them to a degree, but ultimately it's going to be up to them, which making life choices and put them in a better light and a better situation. So when it comes down to it, more or less, they can have a, pretty much good hand. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with giving people the information. And that's one of my main goals is to give the information and help out. So with that being said, shout out to everybody that came through. Might come back a little more later on to touch on this topic. I'm in a rush now, but I want to break down a little more thoroughly about this. I might do a part 5 to this because it's a lot of information to unpack. With that being said, you know what I always say, we here and we gone.